Mm.
And do I have time to tell a funny thing
Yes, you do.
you know about?
For joining us for Village Voices. My name is Trudy Peterson. I coordinate Village Voices for Capitol Hill Village. Thanks, of course, to Mary Bloodworth, who manages our tech support, and May Jean Daniels, who gets out our publicity. Thanks to Karen Stuck, who couldn't be with us tonight, but does publicity as well. And of course, thanks to Judy Berman, our executive director at the Village, without whom none of this would happen, and who last night was given the Community Service Award by the Capitol Hill Foundation, for which we are all just absolutely delighted. We are recording this with our speaker's agreement. Do use chat if you've got questions that you think of during the time of the presentation. All right. Tonight we're going to be talking about Nigeria with uh, Robyn Hinson-Jones, a career Foreign Service officer who served as the principal officer in Nigeria. Robyn had a long career in the State Department, and we're very grateful to have her because Nigeria is in the news these days. We woke up on Christmas morning of last year, if you recall, to learn that the Trump administration had bombed northern Nigeria, ostensibly to save Christians, which was an interesting juxtaposition of reason to do it and date. By February 1, we had in the New York Times a big article, full page, how Trump took up Christian genocide in Nigeria. And it says that he said he launched the Tomahawk missiles at terrorist scum, which he said were responsible for killing Nigerian Christians. So that was February. Then we had 100 at least U.S. soldiers sent to northern Nigeria. March 4, another full page a story on Nigeria, which is headlined as Rural Villagers Are Massacred, Nigerian Military Mostly Shrugs. Long story. And then this Sunday, just 2 days ago, got another story. 150 Fulani die in camp in Nigeria, Amnesty International says. And these were members of the Fulani ethnic group in Nigeria in the northwest that have died in a camp that's being run for them by Nigeria's military. So, all in all, Nigeria has been very much in the news in unusual ways, it seems to me. And it's wonderful to be able to have Robyn with us tonight to talk about Nigeria and what we are really seeing going on there. So, with that, welcome, Robyn.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be here. Um, my claim to fame is that I was Consul General in Lagos, Nigeria from 2001 to 2004. And at that time, I traveled extensively through the country. Sometimes I had a little bit of light security, but sometimes I didn't. And for the most part, I felt pretty safe. You can't do that today in Nigeria anywhere, and certainly not in the north. And I'll get into a little more in a bit about what the State Department says about traveling in Nigeria. um, I can tell you I was extremely surprised to wake up, as Trudy referred to, and see that President Trump had a bombing campaign in northern Nigeria. And I wondered if anybody told him it's complicated. Starting out with, I'm going to talk about three things in during the course of this hour. First, what is Nigeria? Second, what problems does Nigeria have? The problems of poverty, terrorism, corrupt government, and inequitably distributed resources. And finally, US interests and why we would on earth be bombing Nigeria. But starting with the background, what is Nigeria? Well, In 1914, the British amalgamated several of their West African territories. Of course, they did not bother to ask any of the people who lived there, but they brought together three different groups, 18 million people, into one big sprawling colony. They had, and maybe Mary, you can bring up the map now. They brought together the Hausa and Fulani in the north, the Yoruba in the southwest, and the Igbo in the east. This map just gives you a little bit of an idea of what the country looks like. To administer this new colony, which the British named Nigeria, at the time, the traditional governance of these three areas was very, very different. The Yoruba Southwest was governed by a complicated system in which they had obas or kings, and they ruled with permission of councils of chiefs. The Igbo had a very, very democratic system with almost no centralization of power. And in the north, House of Fulani people operated in kind of a feudalistic hierarchy. And so there were different languages, different customs, different everything, which the British used to their own advantage in a kind of divide and conquer scheme. Geographically, Nigeria is about the size of Texas and New Mexico combined. There are about 241 million Nigerians today from 350 different ethnic groups, many of them with their own language. And since the 1970s, the government has said that Muslims and Christians are about in equal numbers, although nobody really knows for sure. But rule of thumb, the Muslims are in the north and the Christians are in the south. It's the most populous country in Africa, most populous country in the world. Lagos itself has between 8 and 21 million people, and its annual growth rate is about 6%. So it's growing pretty fast. Estimated by 2050, Nigeria's population will be larger than that of the United States. So they very much see themselves as the number one country in Africa, as a regional superpower, and that attitude gives them a kind of appreciation for the United States. Both of us are superpowers, and that's something they can relate to. Um, Unfortunately, the bad news is Nigeria is also a country with insufficient investment in urban infrastructure, water, electricity, roads, just about everything you can think of. Um, when I prepared to go to Nigeria in 2001, it was notorious worldwide for its traffic gridlocks because its phone system was so awful that if you wanted to get in touch with anybody, you had to go to see them. And so everybody going everywhere, you couldn't get anywhere from there. Fortunately, they were saved at that time by the introduction of cell phones. And so that just exploded almost overnight because everybody was so desperately in need of a system to communicate that did not involve traveling across town. Um, Apart from being a state created by colonial powers that had no concern for what made sense for the populations, Nigerians over the years, over the century that it has been in existence, have not really done a good job of handling their problems. The government is notoriously corrupt. I mentioned the infrastructure, which does not work very well. Um, and it's just a country that is ripe for insecurity and terrorism. Let me talk to you about three problems that it's got. Oil, number one. Now, one would think that oil would not be a problem, that in fact, it would be a windfall because oil is the principal source of wealth and principal source of government income in Nigeria. The Nigerian budget draws 56% of its projected revenues from oil and gas. So how does it come out to be one of the poorest countries in the world? Well, a, a series of causes have led to that. Pipeline vandalism, crude oil theft, aging infrastructure, and chronic underinvestment in the Niger Delta, which is where the oil mainly comes from. And when I was there, I saw some of those problems firsthand. For example, pipeline vandalism. Now, How do you steal oil from? How do you steal from an oil pipeline? Well, you punch a hole in it and you siphon the oil onto barges. Um, that kind of defies belief because you'd say, well, can't you see if a barge is there siphoning oil from a pipeline? And the answer is yes, you can see it, but if you pay off enough people, nobody talks about it. So that's how you steal from a pipeline. You would think also that a barge can't hide, but it hides in plain sight thanks to cooperation from local government officials and others. Well, of course, the result is the oil spills and it fouls the water so that fishermen can't fish, and it fouls the land so that farmers can't farm. And there's a tremendous amount of just anger and resentment towards the oil companies. When they do try to make amends, for example, by putting clinics in villages, then they stir up resentment because it's in clinics or in some villages, but not other villages. And the local officials really do not do anything towards solving those problems. So, really, there is enough blame to go around. Everybody involved just treats this oil bonanza as something that everybody wants a piece of, to the point that a few people get very, very rich and most of the local people get virtually nothing. Particularly now with what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz, you would think that oil would be just a fantastic windfall for Nigeria, but unfortunately that still doesn't seem to be the case. I looked at the April 29th edition of the Africa Oil and Gas Report, and despite the fact that crude oil prices are surging globally, Nigeria just can't consistently pump enough oil to take advantage of it. So while the producers in the Gulf can't get their oil out, Nigeria just can't even produce its quota share from OPEC of what they would need to bring in enough money, let alone produce more to take advantage of the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz. So it's kind of a mess. It really is. Problem number two, oil is problem number one. Problem number two, food insecurity. According to the United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, armed conflict, devastated flooding, disease outbreaks, desertification, the lack of access to basic services are making millions of Nigerians vulnerable to food insecurity. And about 43% of Nigeria's land is impacted by desertification and land degradation. So that's problem number two. And of course, all of these things lead to instability, lead to a lack of trust in the government, lead to problem number three, which is terrorism in Nigeria. In 2025, more than 12,000 people were killed by various violent groups in Nigeria. And I think the bulk of our time will be spent talking a little bit about the violence, particularly since the United States is now paying attention to it. You may be familiar most out of all the violent groups that there are, the name Boko Haram may be the one that's most familiar to you. Boko Haram means Western education is forbidden. And it was created as a result of a reaction to poverty, unemployment, weak regional government, and longstanding regional inequality. And it was created mainly in the northern states of Nigeria. Um, there was so much resentment towards the government that it was not so difficult for the group to recruit and expand. And since then, there have been splits in Boko Haram, which have allowed ISIS to enter into Nigeria. And so now we've got even more terrorism, even more hostility towards the government. And these groups just abuse the population. So not only do we have terrorism in the form of jihadists, but then the door has also been open for bandits who kidnap people simply for money, and they kidnap people out of schools and churches and markets. Um, they raze villages to the ground. So all kinds of terrible things take place, and the conflict has spread. So it's not just Nigeria now that's got this problem, but it's become regional, and it is involving neighboring countries like Chad, Niger, and Cameroon. Just to give you an idea of what the security situation is like in Nigeria. Nigeria has 36 states, and you know the State Department has travel advisories on all the countries all around the world. For Nigeria, 13 of those states rank on a scale of 1 to 4. A 3 means reconsider traveling to this country. 23 states are rated 4 out of 4, which means do not go there. And of those 23, 9 of them have the number one reason you shouldn't go there. And those are places in the South. You can see on the map, it tends to be Sokoto and Yobe, Borneo, Bauchi, those states. The number one reason not to go there is terrorism. In recent years, these non-state actors have attacked the military as well as civilians. And so when you read in the paper that the military just shrugs and doesn't do anything, well, one of the reasons is they're outmanned and outgunned. From this situation, we've gotten in the United States groups of people who say, there's all this violence, all these people are being killed, all these villages are being burned down, but Christians in America seem to have tagged on to the idea that this is an anti-Christian genocide going on in Nigeria. And what I want to really, really emphasize in this talk is there is plenty of violence against Christians, but also plenty of violence against Muslims. Some of it is religious, some of it is ethnic, some of it is fighting over resources, farmers versus herders. Some of it is people with political ambitions who are pitting one group of supporters against another group of supporters. It's complicated. Outsiders really don't understand it. And I think that the United States really doesn't understand it. When they send in American troops, when they send in bombs, it's way more complicated than black hats and white hats. Where does the United States come in? Well, just to back up a little bit, back in 2025, President Trump said the following. He said that if Nigeria's government continued to, quote, allow the killing of Christians, the USA will immediately stop all aid and assistance to Nigeria and may very well go into that disgraced country, guns a-blazing. I'm hereby instructing our Department of War to prepare for possible action. If we attack, it will be fast, vicious, and sweet. Well, I don't know what could be sweet about something like that, but As you probably read in the press last Christmas, there were strikes on Nigeria by the United States, um, on strikes on Islamic State targets in northwestern Nigeria to follow up president's threat. Um, it was reported that some terrorists were killed. We also know that a lot of the tomahawks that were set off landed in open fields and weren't very effective. But just the idea that America was bombing, landing bombs, striking Nigeria was certainly a big step that had not happened before. U.S. military officials also expressed doubt that the bombings like that kind of military attack would do very much, would accomplish very much, because of course you're not hitting big military installations. You're going after people who are often in small groups, attacking villages. It's hard to concentrate massive armaments of people who are running around on the ground. Um, since the Christmas attack, there have been certainly more terrorist attacks in Nigeria. And on Easter Sunday, we know that 26 Christians were killed in an attack on a church. Nigeria's response to the US action was to certainly deny accusations that it has been allowing the killing of Christians. Um, the Nigerian government says, and I believe it really, really is true, that many different communities are being targeted by terrorists, by bandits, as I explained before, various and sundry people bad actors in Nigeria. Um, what the Foreign Ministry of Foreign Affairs has said is that claiming that only Christians are being subjected is an affront to Nigeria's values and to international peace and security. Characterizing Nigeria as religiously intolerant does not reflect our national reality. Interestingly, one of the people who agrees with that is a senior advisor in the Trump administration, Masad Boulos, who is senior advisor on Middle East and African affairs, and who happens to be Tiffany Trump's father-in-law. And he's on the record as saying that more Muslims than Christians are being killed by Boko Haram and ISIS in Nigeria. The current president of Nigeria, Bola Tinubu, is somebody that I knew personally when I was there. At that time, he was the governor of Lagos State, which was the biggest state in Nigeria. He's a Muslim, but his wife is a Christian minister. So he's hardly a poster child for genocide against Christians. And my experience there was that there was a lot of intermarriage between Muslims and Christians. Lots of people that I knew had Muslim cousins if they were Christians, or Christian cousins if they were Muslims. So the whole idea of anti-Christian genocide just does not hold water if you think of it as being perpetrated by the government of Nigeria. It does happen if you're looking at the terrorist groups like Boko Haram and ISIS, but the government is just as strongly against them as anyone else, which is why they have been cooperating with the United States in these attacks, because if we can help them get rid of those terrorists around the country, so be it. They may not be too enthusiastic about the way we're doing it, but they need to get rid of those terrorists even more than we want to see them gotten rid of. Okay, so that's where we stand right now. Why would Trump get so involved in what's on in Nigeria? Well, some people, there are some people who are kind of noteworthy who are pushing this issue. The actor John Cleese has been very, very outspoken about Christian genocide in Nigeria. Officials from Department of Justice, Ted Cruz, Senator Chris Smith, a Christian charity called Open Door, have all gone on to Fox News and other conservative outlets and been talking about genocide against Christians. So it's a good way for Trump to show the American evangelical right that he's doing something for Christians and getting involved in Africa to stop the genocide of Christians. Meanwhile, there are some people in Nigeria who are promoting this narrative, and there are also people in Nigeria who are saying this is terrible, this is not happening. One of the most prominent people is a Christian bishop in the north called Matthew Kuka, who is Harvard educated and Oxford educated, and he has just been trying his best to tell the world through the Vatican, through every other outlet he can manage, that the violence it's not just about religion, it's also about a general lack of security. But there are other Christians in Nigeria who vehemently disagree with him. The upshot is it's complicated. um the reasons for all of this, and I think I alluded to it before, is anti-government activity. There's simple banditry, kidnapping for ransom, fighting over limited resources. I think that Trudy mentioned something that has happened quite recently with the Fulani tribe, who are in the north. They are a Muslim ethnic group who have been victimized on three fronts. First, they suffered attacks from bandits, and the army moved in to take them out of their villages and put them into a secure place. Well, this secure place turned out to be, they moved about 1,500 of them. It turned out to be more concentration camp than anything else. And last month, there were reports that about 150 of them, mostly women and children, had been dying from disease and starvation in government detention. So it's really the civilians of all ethnic groups who are suffering from this current situation. So that kind of gives you an idea of where Nigeria stands in relationship to the US effort, where the US stands. Some people will say, how concerned is the United States really, or not the United States, but the administration really, about the plight of Christians in Nigeria? When you look at the plight of Christians in other places, for example, China, where they are probably more oppressed than anywhere else, that doesn't seem to be a showstopper in terms of the way the United States treats the Chinese government. Other countries like Pakistan and Egypt, there is also oppression of Christians, and yet the administration does not raise that. It certainly does not use violent methods to attack those countries because of oppression of Christians. So, are we really talking about a place where President Trump and his advisors feel that they can flex their muscles without incurring any significant geopolitical risk, rather than something that is a heartfelt defense of Christians? I leave that to you to think about it and think about whether or not this is a real saving of Christians, or if this is something just geopolitically that makes the administration look good in the eyes of a domestic political audience here in the United States. So, on that note, I think it's about 7:30, and I'm happy to take any questions.
That was wonderful, Robin. What a great overview for all of us. I think I failed to explain that the advertising for this had said that we would also have Ambassador John Campbell, with whom Robin worked and I actually also know. Turns out he had a shoulder operation scheduled for later in the month, and it got moved up till today. So he couldn't be with us. But frankly, Robin, I don't think we missed him at all. You were terrific.
I'm not going to tell him that.
Let me ask you, because deep in the 20th century history of Nigeria is a whole Biafran War. And how has that affected at all today? And maybe you could explain a little bit about the war itself.
Well, going back to the kind of way that Nigeria was divided up by the British, the Igbo were the tribe that got the southeastern part of the country, and they decided that they wanted to secede. So if you're looking down at Enugu, sort of it's green if you want to put the cursor by it. Yeah, right there in Nugu and that the area around that, that's kind of where Biafra was. And that area wanted to secede from the rest of Nigeria. There was a war, kind of like our civil war, to keep them in. About 2 million people died. And at the end of the day, the secession failed miserably. Today, um, there are still people, even among the youth, who still beat that drum and think secession is something that they want to do, but it really does not have much, doesn't have legs, and it's not much of an issue. I mean, I don't think that secession is really something that a lot of people still talk about. When I was there, it was not an issue, and that was included in my consular district, and I traveled down there a couple of times. People are not really talking about it much anymore.
Robin, what year was that war?
It was in the late 60s. So
Okay.
it was it was I think about 13 months, and it was well, I don't know, probably 68, 69, somewhere around there.
Mhm. Do we have questions? I don't see any in the chat, but do we have hands, Mary? I can't see. Well, interestingly, I met a couple of activists who worked in Bangladesh for Bangladesh's independence from Pakistan, and they had
Mm.
previously been in Biafra, and
Ah,
they said, we lost Biafra. That's why we were so convinced that we had to win in Bangladesh.
wow.
Eh,
Interesting.
Avis Bolin, another former diplomat's got her hand up. Avis,
Who's she there? Where is
yes,
she? Oh, there she is. I see her.
unmute
You're
yourself.
muted. You're still muted.
Um,
There we go.
well, Robin, thank you for a wonderful presentation, so clear and succinct and everything. Could you say a few words about the origins of the Christian population in Nigeria? I assume it was missionaries running all over the
Missionaries.
place, and I mean, what maybe you said, and I missed that, what percentage they are of the population?
Um, the government in 1970, the government said they're about half.
Mm.
And I don't think there's ever been any challenge to that number, half Christian, half Muslim. And so people kind of accept that. I suspect that it's not half, but I don't really know in which direction it's changed since then. But yes, the origin of Christianity in Nigeria. Of course, the British were there, and missionaries always show up along with the military. And so that's how it got to be such a Christian oriented country, particularly in the South. And Islam has been there for a long, long time in the North. So, excuse me, my cat is dragging me down. Um, but yeah, it was the British influence, and of course, American missionaries. They're still there. It's not as though independence got rid of missionaries. There are still quite a few missionaries in Nigeria, Americans included.
Thank you.
Robyn,
Could I just add one thing about Biafra? I remember very well that when that happened, and in Western Europe,
Hmm.
it became a kind of cause célèbre, and people thought the Biafrans were just being, mistreated by the government, and people went to fight for them, and I mean it was sort of amazing looking back on it that it had such a. I mean, do you have any explanation why
Well,
it had such an appeal?
I guess I don't really have much of an explanation, except that was certainly a time, as you recall, that many African countries were trying to gain independence from colonial overlords. And I guess at that point, seceding from a recently independent African country was a little bit unusual. And I don't know, maybe I don't really know why it was such an international. It attracted so much international attention, but I recall it really, really, as you say, it really did. Even here in the United States, people
Yeah,
were very aware of it, and there it was in the middle of the continent. You would think that it might have passed, what happened might have passed without much notice in the West, but people really did know about it and pay attention to it.
yeah. Much more
we
than they have any other
Kind of,
similar.
yeah, yeah,
It's really weird.
uh,
yeah.
we have a question in the chat, and it's what is happening to U.S. aid to Nigeria? Is there anything positive that the U.S. can do to make the situation better?
Well, with the almost total demise of aid, USAID, it has impacted Nigeria and everybody else, although they have not been zeroed out completely, unlike many other places.
Hmm.
Um, Anything to make the situation better? You know, I really am of the opinion that that impetus has to come from Nigerians. Um, More aid. I mean, you can give more aid or less aid, but one of the things that really struck me about Nigeria was how much of the aid money we gave to them at that time was spent in making sure that it wasn't stolen or wasted. And you just reached a point where you thought, well, we've got so many layers and layers of Americans controlling this, getting paid to control this aid money that we're supposedly giving them. What's the point? So, to a certain extent, unless Nigerians get to the point where they are committed to spending the money wisely, making sure that they are helping their people, and they bring, it's very frustrating sometimes.
Okay, well, in terms of frustration, then, in the country of so many ethnic groups, says one of our chat people, how do they communicate? In what language?
Mainly English. A lot of people speak Pidgin. I mean, everybody who's been educated speaks English. Um, Pidgin is a combination of Yoruba, some English, some other languages that a lot of people do use as well.
Hmm.
and you even hear it. You know, they have a pretty big movie industry called Nollywood,
Yes.
and a lot of movies are in pidgin, and some are in English as well. So yeah, that's how they communicate.
Well, you moved right on to culture, and I was going to point you there a little bit. There has been an incredible number of novelists who have recently come out of Nigeria. What do you attribute this bloom to, and do you have any favorites?
Chinua Achebe is one of my favorites. Um, the bloom is, you know, Nigeria. I've been in a lot of countries in Africa, and I've lived in, I guess, four of them. And Nigerians do stand out for just being more vibrant, more inquisitive, more I don't know what the words are, active, more, you know, it's no surprise that they write more. Their music is all over the world. Their plays are all over the world. They are their culture just makes them very, very aggressive, sometimes in a good way. Not always, but in terms of getting out there and spreading their ideas, their culture, their history, very, very active. And so I think that might be part of the reason why you see Nigerian musicians, Nigerian authors, Nigerian playwrights all over,
Hmm.
which is a great thing.
Yes.
And there are a lot of them. There are more of them than anybody else in Africa.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, oh, I'm looking to see if there are other hands. If not, let me take you really back in history a little bit. And there have been uh, long, long discussions over the return of the Benin bronzes. And even though Benin is not the Benin of the country Benin, that's a big Nigeria issue. Um, what can you tell us about it, where it stands right now?
Um, I don't know where the issue stands right now. I guess it's well, um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's certainly still making Benin bronzes in the state of Benin, but the return of the original ones, which I guess mainly are in British hands. Um, I guess they're kind of like the same situation as the Elgin marbles of if you start returning things, then where do you stop? I mean, I think they should be returned, uh, but I have not heard of much movement in that direction. Maybe somebody else, I don't know, Avis or somebody else knows more about it than I do right now, but I've not heard about any movement in that direction.
Well, there have been moves to return some things, and there had been a promise to create a museum just indeed for them. There are bronzes, not all of them are bronze, some of them are wood, that are also in Germany and France. And I know Germany has been in discussions on these materials, but I think France has just returned some.
Okay, well, I don't know about that. Yeah, I just have not been following that.
I'm
Yeah,
Avis, did you want to say something else? You have your hand up
Yeah,
still.
sorry if it's
but
okay.
you
Another question.
Sure.
Yeah, Robin, could you say a word about the relationship of Nigeria to the other, I suppose specifically, particularly West African countries? I mean, they're the biggest and sounds like the most dynamic. Are they regarded as the sort of the great power of that region? Do they cooperate with other countries in the region?
they do cooperate, but in my experience traveling to some of the other countries, um, there's a great deal of suspicion towards Nigeria. maybe because of the size, maybe because they tend to be aggressive, maybe because they've got oil, which sort of fuels the economy, even though it's not used very efficiently. Um, Other countries are very careful not to be kind of run over by Nigeria, um, and they're viewed, I think, by neighboring countries as being very very corrupt. I mean, that is generally the stain that accompanies Nigeria, unfortunately, um, all over the continent, and particularly among their neighbors.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, we have a question in the chat, going back to the discussion on the Benin bronzes, and that is, would returned historic objects be safe in the country of origin?
Um, the museums that they have now, and again, my information is kind of old, so there may have been changes since I was there, but they were not particularly well secured. Of course, you could say that about the Louvre too. The things are stolen from them, so um, I don't know, but yeah, they were not particularly well secured.
I do know that former President Obasanjo was so taken by the U.S. presidential library system, which is presidential archive system, that he built his own presidential compound with museum and archives and playgrounds for children and I don't know what all,
Mm, mm, mm.
but that's the presidential library from the U.S. spilling over into Nigeria.
Well, that's a good thing. Is he the only one so far?
He's the only one I'm aware of. There's obviously things in South Africa to commemorate Mandela, but it's a
Yeah.
very different kind of commemoration. This is really set up by him to be his legacy place.
Uh-huh. Hmm. Like a presidential library would be.
Yep,
Yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah. Great.
okay. Anybody else? Anything else that you want to talk about? Uh, Robyn, would you talk a little bit more about the different tribal groups that are in Nigeria? There are so many, and I get, I get a few straight in my head, but how many are there, and are they starting now to assemble in the cities and mix together?
Yeah. There are about 350 different tribal groups, and they kind of boil down to three big ones: the House of Fulani in the north, the Igbo in the southeast, and the Yoruba in the southwest. And I think of all those, the Yoruba are
Mm,
the biggest single
mm.
one, and they all have their own own languages. So the I don't really know the current number. I used to have that figure of a percentage of the population that is in the cities, but it is very big. Um, People do move to the cities in large numbers, and more than half the population is in the city, or are in the cities. I can tell you, I think I have it somewhere in my notes, the population of Lagos itself, way bigger than New York, which is our biggest city in the United States. I think I think I mentioned it, it's between 18 and 21 million. Yeah, so the cities are where things happen, and then they're just sprawling. Yeah. But
And
over half of well over half of the population lives in
but are you
cities.
is the tribal culture coming into the city, or are you starting to see people mixed marriages, people moving back and forth between those groups?
People very much go back to they still have ties with their villages. I don't think when they move to the villages, they don't lose ties. When they move to the cities, they don't lose ties with their villages, and they go back. for all kinds of occasions. So the links are still there, but and there is intermarriage, and when they all get into the cities and start just living together, yes, there is intermarriage, and yes, they do not necessarily marry within their own tribal group. There are mixed marriages.
Mhm.
So that is certainly a good thing. But they keep those ties, and there's something else that always struck me about Nigerians. Um, there is a tremendous feeling of responsibility for family that's left back in the village. So, far more than Americans ever have, you are responsible for school fees for the extended family. You're responsible for people in the village that get sick. You're responsible for helping people back in the village. If you've succeeded, if you've gone to the city, if you've got a good job, there's a tremendous responsibility to keep those ties back in the village and to help those people who have helped you get out of the village and get that good job and live in that fancy place. So the links are very strong.
We've seen press reports over the years that gays have been at least badly treated, if not discriminated against, in many African countries. What's the situation as you know it in Nigeria?
As far as I know, and again, I haven't been there for a while, but um, gays are not uh, welcome, appreciated, accepted in Nigeria,
Mhm,
in
mhm,
Nigerian society.
mhm, uh-huh.
And they
What
so
about,
we had well, yeah, in fact, being gay was illegal, and maybe it still is. Um, we had a gay officer in the American embassy who was harassed from time to time, which was pretty damned unusual, harassing American diplomat. But yeah, it was very much an issue of just not being accepted in any quarter.
how about a comment on the status of women in Nigerian society? And if you want to say that it's different in all three ethnic groups, I understand that too.
Yeah, it is. In the North, first of all, the in the North, women tend to have 6 to 7 children on average. So they tend to be more tied to the home and don't get out and work and have jobs outside of the home. Whereas in the South, where their educational system is better, where there's more opportunity to travel outside of Nigeria, um, and just culturally, women are a lot more forward and yeah, just more vocal, more visible, more. You mentioned a woman that you saw in in some international meetings, and that doesn't surprise me at all. Women are in high places in government, or can be. So there's a big difference between the different ethnic groups in how women are treated and how accomplished they become.
Mhm, mhm. Well, anyone else with last comments or questions? If not, um, I want to say thanks to Robin. I do want to tell people that our next program, our next Village Voices, will be on Monday, June 8th, and it will be Marcus Kidd. He's an actor who did a one-man play on Beowulf this spring at Chaw's at Taffety Punk Theater and is up for a Helen Hayes Award for it. So we're proud of him, and he's going to come and talk with us about how he started to get interested in doing a play, as he calls it, from the bard to a bar, and talk about how he decided to script Beowulf and then do the play as a one-man show. So that will be on Monday, June 8th. That will close our spring season. Then we'll take July and August off, and we'll be back with a full slate of programs September through December. So look for us in the Capitol Hill Village calendar and in news releases, and we'll tell you all about what autumn is going to be. But now look forward to June 8th and
Okay.
Marcus Kidd. And I can't thank you enough, Robyn. That was just terrific.
Well,
And
thank you. Thanks for the
wonderful,
opportunity.
wonderful to learn something about a situation that is, as you say, complicated. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.